Morning, everybody. Just turned 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Nicole Medora, the Early Childhood Specialist at DOE, and I'm joined by Marcy. Marcy, can you hear us and be heard okay?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today.
Perfect. All right. Here we go. So quick housekeeping items as usual. Link to the guidebook was provided via email. If you don't have access to that, the link is here that you can type into your web browser, and it should bring you right to the PDF document. It's also housed on our early childhood website under preschool. At the end of today's meeting, a 1-hour certificate will be available. At any time, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions or utilize the chat box feature. And we don't have any scheduled breaks, so please take care of any personal items that you have at any time. And for future use, we are recording today's meeting, and it will be available on our Professional Learning and Resources tab later today or tomorrow. So today brings us to July 21st. Our discussion is transition to preschool and kindergarten. After this week, we'll have one more session next Wednesday on the 28th, which will be around technical assistance. Flying by. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and jump right in. So in the guidebook on page 16 is where the conversation of transitions starts. So if you haven't had time to access that yet, no big deal. We're just going to run through it today. And similar to other conversations we've had, topics and sections within the guidebook are simply ways that we could encourage programs to go above and beyond any licensing requirements or things like that. So, you know, topics we'll discuss are not necessarily requirements today. However, they are ways to encourage folks to sort of stretch your thinking and go maybe above and beyond what you're accustomed to. Or maybe you're already doing these things, and we'd love to hear about those ideas and strategies for transitions as well. So when we talk about transitions into pre-K or even into kindergarten, we know that this is a time for students that are moving into potentially a new program or a new classroom. And that can be a really overwhelming but exciting time, perhaps maybe some anxiety for students and for their families, and let's not forget for the educators as well, right? Every year when we get a new roster of students, it can be really overwhelming because we don't know them. You know, the transition strategies are just as much for us as it is for them. So some things that you might want to consider. So the first one being that transitions might be the first time that a child has been in a formal classroom setting or program. And I just wanted to pop the second one up here too, that it might also be the first time that a parent or family has had a child in a classroom setting, such as a public pre-K, for example. So keeping these two pieces in mind as you're getting your roster of students, you may not recognize any of the names on there. They might not have siblings that you are familiar with. And depending on what type of survey or questionnaires you ask families to complete during the registration process, you might not have much information in regards to what type of education, what type of experiences they've had before they come to you. So if you keep that in mind and just assume that this is the first time for students and potentially their families, it might help to sort of broaden your scope of communication with them, broaden your strategies of how to get them settled in, knowing that they're all going to have their own individual time and development needed to fully settle in and feel comfortable in the classroom. Another aspect to consider is that there's lots of information that we have as educators that parents and families might not have. And we had mentioned this briefly in our family engagement session 2 weeks ago now. And I just like to reiterate it that, you know, just because an adult has a child, it doesn't mean that they're an early childhood specialist, right? It doesn't mean they have an early childhood background in their child's development. So they're bringing a lot to the table in terms of information about their child, and you're bringing a lot to the table in terms of your program, your expectations, your goals, etc. That should be shared with families as soon as possible as well. So continuing on page 16 with transitions. So a strong transition plan can help set the tone for positive future experiences between educators, families, and children. So a transition plan is something that many schools will create with a team of teachers perhaps, or with individual teachers, so that they have sort of a map, if you will, for how they're going to interact with and help the process of moving into the classroom for their incoming students. And also, transition plans might include the end of the pre-K year into kindergarten, right? So let's not forget that these students are moving up through the grades, and your interactions still with the family and still with other educators and administrators will be just as important and should be included in that plan as well. When educators discuss incoming children together, they gain an understanding of the individual children, right? So they enhance support, they can make better choices around classroom placement and communication across programs and classrooms. So again, this is speaking to more so around the end of the pre-K school year and getting those students ready to transition into kindergarten. So there's a lot of strategies that I've seen that work really well with this. One thing we always encourage is that team approach, right? The adult team, so the pre-K teaching staff and the kindergarten teaching staff coming together more than once likely to really talk about what happened in pre-K, what's going to happen in kindergarten, that's planned at least, and how are those students going to transition between those two grades? Which students might need more support, which students might need more time, which families are very communicative, and which families need a little more assistance and a little more interaction or communication opportunities. Maybe they don't respond to verbal communication, they respond best to written communication, right? So all of those things that the pre-K teacher has learned about the child and about their family throughout the course of the school year should be passed on to the kindergarten team, right? There's no secrets there. We're only going to benefit from having those conversations. Some other strategies I've seen that work really well is towards the end of the school year, they'll have, for example, kindergarten teachers and pre-K teachers swap for a period of time. So kindergarten teachers will come into the pre-K classroom and maybe read a story, share a snack, an activity or whatnot. And that just gives that kindergarten teacher a chance to put faces to names and just sort of feel the environment of those students in the classroom setting. And the pre-K teacher will go into the kindergarten classroom just to cover for that period of time, perhaps. Another strategy that I've heard of that I really like is the pre-K teachers will have their current students write a letter to the incoming pre-K students, right? So they're sort of passing the classroom and passing the teacher on to a new set of students, and it's just a way for them to acknowledge that they're getting older and they're moving on to kindergarten and new students will come in, right? So sort of owning what they experienced in that classroom and passing it along. It's also a great time to reiterate transitions for new students who might be riding a school bus, who might be transitioning into a cafeteria for lunchtime in kindergarten, transitioning into allied arts classrooms perhaps. So all of those things, there's a lot to consider, and you really can't go wrong keeping it all in mind and giving them the experience and just to start to get used to those items. And then one other positive transition strategy or aspect is that strategies can help set children up for a successful outlook in school. So when you take away the guesswork and you really prepare them for what they're going to see, what they're going to hear, how they might interact, you're taking out that surprise factor, right? Getting them used to the setting, getting them used to the teacher, etc. I'm going to pause real quick before we move on and just allow time for any questions or thoughts on some transition strategies. Oh, and I also wanted to put in the chat box a link to the parking lot document that we have available. Let's give it another 10 seconds or so, and then move us along. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to pass this off to Marcy.
Okay, so we are going to play a little fun activity around transitions. And we're going to use the annotate feature on our Zoom. And so if you don't remember how to use that or haven't used it in the past, there's the instructions here. Mine is located at the very top of my screen under view options, right beside the green. You're viewing Nicole's screen where she's sharing a screen. And if you go under view options and pull that down, annotate is right there. Once you find annotate, and it may be at the bottom of your screen under more also. Once you find that, you're going to select stamp, and then it'll bring up a couple of different stamps that you can use. And then if you make a mistake, you can hit undo or clear. and just let me know if everybody can find that or has any questions before we move on to the next screen. So not seeing any questions in the chat room. So on this screen, we have some images of some more commonly used transition activities. And so what I would like to do, actually I'll run through them first. The first one would be classroom visit prior to the first day of school, meet the teacher events prior to the first day of school, incoming student screening events, written communications, social events such as a summer ice cream social or a meeting at the playground or park, and then home visits. Using your annotate feature, I would love for you to stamp on the images that you are currently using in your programs or schools, in your classrooms. So I'm seeing a lot of screening events and meeting the teacher events, which is great. And communication, maybe some summer prior to school opening socials, and a few classroom visits prior to the first day of school. And that one is a common one, maybe not so much last year or this year, just because of the pandemic year. So if you've used that in the past, or you normally use that, you could annotate that one also. And I see one person who's doing home visits, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next activity, what I'd love for you to do is open up the chat room and or unmute yourself. And just if there's activities that you're doing currently that are not one of these 6 that are different activities, if you could just let us know about that as well, that would be amazing. And feel free to unmute and just chat about. It would be great too, or throw that right in the chat room.
Marcy, Mary Beth here.
Good morning.
Last year was very different, and but we did, for the beginning of the year, do the screenings with individual meetings, and we had them tour the classroom. We had a very, I think we allowed one parent, and the child went with me and the parent went with the ed tech, and then we kind of swapped out. I did the screening, and then we had a good chat with the parent and had a nice tour, and then we took a picture of the child with their mask on, their mask off. And typically we do a spring open house and all parents come, and they also had a summer type of open house where the school bus came and they got to have a bus ride, and those things seem to be really nice. I put in the chat room though that we serve 5 towns, and I don't know if other people have a big catchment area of students. So the beginning of the year isn't as tough for me. I always feel bad at the end of the year because, let's see, this year we had 16. Do we have 16 not often, my brain's dead. 16, 17 students. Well, anyway, and maybe a third were Hope students, and then we had 4 or 5 other schools. So, we would get in a typical year, go over and start earlier in the spring, maybe in March, and have a library hour and meet all the allied teachers, and they do a mini lesson kind of slowly through the spring. But I always felt like it didn't affect the kids going to Camden, Rockport, other schools. So that one is tricky. And I do write a little synopsis, and the kindergarten teachers have always been really receptive. Not so much academic stuff, but more things like Johnny really likes, he loves Legos, or this is soothing, or things like that might help the teacher. And if we've done any, maybe they've been referred for some special ed support, but didn't qualify, but definitely needed some tier of support. So that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the other schools about that. But I'm hoping this year we can do a little more both with our school, because we are in a separate building. So I used to call our big school the big school. Now I have to stop doing that, because the kids will be like, the big school. I feel like, no, it's not the big house. We're not going to prison. We're going to school. So I did have some teachers come out on the playground this year in the spring and do some activities, but it's been, transition's been tricky for me. And we also have a new kindergarten teacher this year, and it's going to be very different, because she is going to have the kindergarten class in a yurt, and it is going to be, she has those kids outdoors. They really are an outdoor classroom. So, and she's just a whole different cup of tea. We're going to be very collaborative and do things together, even pre-K and kindergarten. She has them in their rubber boots and their rain pants, and they are outdoors. So it's all new, but I'm really excited, because it's not going, they're going to go from dramatic play to sitting at tables and writing.
Right.
So
I'll be very interested to hear how the year goes for you later on, because that sounds really exciting.
I'm very jealous. The yurt is beautiful. She's deserving, but I'm jealous.
I want to base real quick on, there's a question in the chat room from Tracy about how and when are home visits scheduled. She says she doesn't necessarily feel that parents in their school will be open to this. And then there is an answer, and I wanted to talk about the home visits real quick. So home visits in a Head Start program are part of their standards. They do them 2-3 times a year. A lot of public pre-K programs do not. Overall, I think it's a really positive thing. And so a lot of parents do have a hard time with home visits, because they feel like people are coming in to check up on them, to see what their home is like, to make sure it's a safe environment, kind of in a looking at it in a negative way. Home visits essentially are set up so you can meet the parent and the child in their home environment, which puts them more at ease when meeting a teacher from a school, pretty much. It's very important to let them know that we're not there to see where they live or look at their home, or we don't care if it's clean or dirty, that sort of thing. That's not why we're there. We really want to see how the child interacts with, parent and child interact at home. We want to put them at ease. If they have other siblings, it's easier than finding childcare to come out to the school also. But I think it's a really important, and I love the answer that most parents change their mind after they had the experience and said it was very positive. I feel like they can be really, really positive. Nicole, did you want to add something?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Marcy. Yeah, I was noticing I cleared the screen already for the annotations, but the home visits square there on the bottom right didn't have many stamps. So, telling us that that's not a common practice for folks here today, which I'm not surprised one bit. Home visits can be very intimidating for all involved. I think the biggest message here would be that we for public pre-K don't require them. So it's not like we would say you have to offer a home visit. However, with that said, and like Jamie mentioned in the chat box as well, making it available for some families that might wish to partake in that type of interaction with you is really fantastic. It's a way for the parents and the children to sort of feel at ease in their own environment. And I think a lot of the hesitation comes from our part as the educators and sort of putting ourselves out there in the community, in somebody's home. It can feel awkward. And more often than not, this is my own research, not anything that's written anywhere, but I would be willing to bet that more often than not, our own biases of how people live and our assumptions of how people live get in the way of us putting ourselves out there and saying, you know, I just want to do this for the benefit of our relationship because we're serving the same child, right? Your student is in my classroom, and having an idea of what they experienced when they were with me, and me having an idea of what they experienced when they're with you is going to benefit that child's development in the long run. So there's a really great activity that I've seen Head Start folks do before, and I can just like run through it really quickly, but it's a visual, like a cartoon visual of the inside of a person's home. And in the picture, you see an ironing board out with the iron unplugged, but on the ironing board. You see a TV on. You see a hole in the wall behind the couch. You see a coffee table with an open pizza box and pizza crust strewn about, empty juice boxes strewn about, clothes strewn about, right? So as I'm describing this to you, I imagine you're getting a visual in your head of disorganization, maybe chaos, and the thoughts that you get when you enter a space like that might be one of, oh my gosh, these poor children. Oh my gosh, this poor family. They're living in squalor, right? But if you take a minute and sort of try and be really conscious to flip that and to look at that picture and say, oh, they have an ironing board and an iron. They must really care about the way their clothes look, right? They don't want wrinkles. They want to look neat. Oh, there's a hole in the wall. Well, let's think about where this home is settled. Is it in the city? Is there room outside for their children to go out and run and play and get fresh air? Maybe not. Maybe their only space to safely run is inside. And oops, they put a hole in the wall, right? So at least the children are running and getting exercise. There's a pizza box on the table that's open and strewn about. Okay, well, at least they're eating. At least they're being fed, right? Clothes are strewn about. Well, you know, maybe they don't have a dresser or a closet, and maybe that's just where they put their clothes, right? So what you sense and assume might not be true. So if we can sort of put our own biases away and thinking about how we approach a home visit and the reasons why we want to encourage home visiting, it can really sort of flip the lid on what we're trying to do as an educator in the public school system. So again, not a requirement, strongly encouraged. Some families are going to be really open to the idea. Some families won't be, and that's okay. At this moment in time, we're just doing our best to reach out and sort of let them know why we're here and how we want to support them. And also I'll add too, in my experience as a mom and as an educator, the children love having their teachers come to their house, right? They get so excited to think that their classroom teacher is going to come and you know, they want to show them their room and they want to show them where they do this and do that. So it can be really exciting and, you know, a positive event for the children. So, and then timing of home visits, I know I'm getting off of my soapbox now. Timing of home visits can be really interesting too. So I know in the chat box, they mentioned doing it before the school year starts. So that's one strategy. I know other programs that wait and will offer home visiting, you know, come October, November, or at another time during the school year once some more time to sort of transition into the classroom has happened. So I don't know necessarily, and Marcy or other folks on the call can chime in on this if you think differently, but I'm not sure that there's a perfect time frame for home visits. I think I would just be more apt to say, consider it. Think about it. Think about offering it as part of your communication and transition strategies with families.
I like the idea of doing the home visit before school starts as part of the transition plan, simply to meet the parents and meet the child before school starts. It's just really a positive thing. And then when you're going in, you know, when school is starting, then the child already knows you, they're familiar with you. I also think that we used to do them around like the first parent teacher conference, so around October, November, and that would be set up as a home visit also. And that was just a really good chance to check in. And I did want to tell one story, my favorite home visiting story, because I used to be in a program that we did home visits, and this is one reason why it's so super important. But I had a 4-year-old in my classroom. This was 5 to 7 years ago, and he did not speak, literally did not say a word. He would look at us, he would not answer us, he wouldn't really get involved in activities. And so we were very, of course, nervous. We couldn't do screenings. He wouldn't engage in anything. And so we'd sit at the table with him and we do puzzles and, try to get him engaged in things and bring children over. Would not speak a word. So we were very, very concerned. I did not do the home visit. My co-teacher did the home visit and to speak to the parents about what was happening in the classroom. Got there, this little boy was running around, screaming, talking, chattering, was just incredibly verbal. And we were like, okay, but it's the difference between seeing that child in his home environment where he's super comfortable and where he knows everybody and everything, and then going into school where he's really shy. And we had a lot of developmental concerns, which clearly was not the case. So that's just one really good example of why they're so important. Sally, you also were unmuting, so I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
I did. I was going to pop in. What I found, so I'm in a public school and I'm in a school where no home visits ever happen. And the community, I live in the community that I teach in, and people think it's weird if you do home visits. Like really like, oh, like more the parents, because Nicole, you're right, the kids get super psyched. But last year with COVID, or no, not last year, the year before, whatever, it's all, the years are blending, the months are blending. I did home visits when we went, when we had to do remote, and I called every parent first and just said I had a packet to drop off. Anyways, what I'm getting at is I'm going to try it this year before school starts. Granted, it'll be on my own time. And I live in my community, so I can like figure out where they live, map a route. But my main point is if I have a reason to go, like for the parents. So what I found was successful was when I said, well, I have a gift package, and it literally like crayons, pencils, nothing that's a lot of money. But if I say, I really have something I'd like to drop off for the child, I want them to be able to see me. Would you be up for this? And then leave it to the parent. I can't imagine I'd have any of them that would say no. But if I did, I'd be like, oh, no problem. I'll give it to you at open house. But I just found from talking to many of the families, and, I have siblings and stuff, it's if I have like something to give or a reason, because they think it's weird. And I acknowledge that too, but it's the parents, not the kids. And I'll say, yeah, it's weird that teachers want to do this. And then they're like, yeah, because they didn't have that when they were kids. And so even though the students get super pumped and they need it, my personal main reason for doing it is for the parents. I want to see the parents and let them know that I'm a team player. So I guess my whole point of this was just when I say I have a care package, and then sometimes I'll say, well, could I just drop it off at your doorstep if you're not there? So there's a surprise. That has seemed to be very receptive and positive. So if anybody wants to try it, that might help.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was going to add something to that, Sally, and now I completely forgot what it was.
And then different parents too, like some parents invited me right into the house, and then I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get out of there because the kids were like, play with this and do with that. And I was just like, found myself there for a long time. Where other parents, you can pick up, read the body language. I'm just like in the yard, just dropping something off, and that's all they wanted. And that's fine. Because you think of our generation or what our childhood was like, or if they didn't have a good experience with school, I'd be like, why is this teacher coming to my house? Like a lot of them might feel like we're judgmental and they're nosy. And so to get past that part of this is a positive thing.
Right. And I remember what I was going to add to that. I'm willing to bet that for some of those families that have students in pre-K and you're offering home visits and you do the home visits and it's a positive experience, I'm willing to bet that once that child enters kindergarten and perhaps the kindergarten teacher doesn't do home visits, the family might be like, oh, I really liked that. So like, why don't you, could we meet at my home or whatever? I've heard of it being, seclusive to pre-K teachers in terms of home visiting, and that as the student ages, that doesn't happen anymore. But why not? Why couldn't the kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher conduct a home visit for the exact same reasons that you just mentioned? I think that would be a great strategy for them. Okay, so I'm going to move us along. We do have another interactive activity to do next that Marcy will explain. And actually, I'm going to back out of the PowerPoint real quick. So go ahead, Marcy, if you want to lead us in this one.
Okay, I'm going to need to be able to read the slide.
Yes. Oh, hold on. I'm going to turn off my video because it's.
Oh, good. Yep. So we looked, when we did family engagement, we looked at low impact, moderate impact, and high impact strategies around family engagement. And so I thought it would be interesting to do the same thing around transitions. The one example I have on here was taken from the family engagement piece because it was around transition. So the low impact strategy would be family teacher conferences by appointment during work days, which clearly a lot of families are working and are unable to make appointments or needing to take time off or find childcare for siblings, that sort of thing. A moderate impact would be a family teacher conference with the family teacher conferences that are held twice a year, available on evenings and weekends, which I think is what most of our public schools are doing right now. And then a high impact for around transitioning would be family teacher home visits quarterly. Teachers, which we just talked about, visiting in the fall to launch relationships. I do, like I said, before school starts, I think is a great strategy in the winter and spring to share information and supporting around transitions to kindergarten. And so what I wanted to do was take some examples from you guys about what you're currently doing and put that in a low, moderate, or high category, and then kind of work around to figure out what the other pieces of that would be. So I'm wondering, well, in the chat room, somebody had stated that they do an open house in the spring prior to the school year starting. And so what I'd love you guys to do is just unmute, and we're just going to talk about whether we think that is a low, moderate, or high impact strategy. So having an open house for incoming students in the spring before the school year starts. Do we think that's a low, moderate, or high? And if you're more comfortable putting that in the chat, you can feel free to do it that way also as well. And I apologize for my voice today. I'm getting over a cold. I sound like I've been singing a lot, but I have not. Actually, I will put that example in the chat. That might be easier. So does anybody have any thoughts about holding an open house in the spring prior to transitioning into kindergarten or pre-K, whether that would be a low, moderate, or high impact? So the message I got is a moderate impact, same for everyone, but the potential to take one-on-one or to talk one-on-one. I think that would be a moderate impact. Yes, I do agree with that. I think the low impact around that would be having an open house after the school year starts before and not having met the teachers, not having seen the classroom, that sort of thing. And then on the high end of that, I would say the spring open house coupled with information that comes out during the summer, maybe a summer gathering, ice cream social, that sort of thing, as well as an open house right after school starts, so that all of that being the transition plan together. All of those activities engage parents, engage children. You get to meet the teacher more than once, see your classmates, and then it kind of opens up the conversation from spring until school starts and beyond about what will happen when children are transitioning into school. Would anybody like to offer up another example?
I have one, Marcy. I'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds or so, but if there isn't any other examples, I can provide one. see if I'm an example in the chat box, an end of the year celebration of their learning.
It's a good example. So thoughts around from everybody around whether that would be a low, medium, or high impact strategy?
I would say,
I would have,
Kathy was
sorry,
saying,
didn't mean
I
to
would say
interrupt you.
moderate.
My question around that end of year celebration is, in a typical year, is that with families or just in the classroom of students?
Parents,
With family.
parents.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So, and then I would just ask Catherine, is
And
that still moderate for you?
Kathy's
with family?
saying, I equate that
know what I would
almost to our
say.
graduation celebration. And what we end up doing for our, on a non-COVID year, of course, is we do our graduation ceremony. There's a video that reviews their year. So a way to summarize their learning throughout the year. Parents are invited. There's a potluck. So there's, you know, a meet and greet of sorts as well for families who have some relationships or who haven't created relationships yet. And it's really lovely. I mean, we're right on Mackworth Island, so there's opportunity to explore the outside space as well. So using the gym, and it's almost like a more formal graduation ceremony of sorts with the caps and everything, but it's an opportunity to potluck and share and make connections with other families.
Thanks, Catherine.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if this is the, well, anyway, we have historically, since we started, done our Family Fridays. And I don't know if those are transitions, but they just are ongoing. And we've done such a variety of things. Last year, we only offered visits to the pre-K, which was a big deal. And it was we had to do 2 Fridays to get everybody in, but, and we had, we asked for maybe 1 or 2 parents or family members, and some of them we had aunt, grandmother, and we couldn't say no. So everybody was masked, and we did like a 20 to 30 minute and had their workout and things like that, and just a chance to really talk with a teacher. And people were very, really impressed with that. And I think that it showed how much they missed being able to be more part of the classroom, especially some of the parents that I'd had their children before, but we typically do once a month when a normal school year, because I remember when, Nicole, you first met with us and I read the chapter 124 and all, and it was like that. And I kept telling everybody, we have to have these family activities. So we take it pretty seriously. And like I've said before, we've had potluck dinner, pizza party, learning celebrations, field trips. One time we had a whole bunch of animals come to the school, and we invited the kindergarten to come to, and they were really, really, really well attended. So we do a beach trip at the very end of the year, and we don't have to have a school bus, and so that's super well attended. And we did it this year and have a big picnic, and we bury a pirate treasure. And so I felt like in a normal school year, we would probably do at least 10 events. So other than open house and conferences.
Sorry, I'm in the chat room. Yeah, I think those are all really good, especially during the school year, to have, as is what I was writing in the chat room, parents in the classroom coming in to visit, volunteering, that sort of thing. It really gives them a sense of how the school day is run, what their children are doing, meeting other adults in the building, which is all really important for transitioning, because if we don't know those things, it's, you know, sending your children off to people that we are not comfortable with, haven't met yet, that sort of thing. And that can be really scary, especially with incoming pre-K or pre-K students, because they're little.
I had one quick thing to point out or just say, and every school is so different, so I don't know what the transition is, but for me in my public school, the most valuable family engagement I have is I feel I'm the luckiest teacher because it's a half-day pre-K program, 5 days a week. But when the kids get picked up by their parents, I walk all the kids out to the parking lot to the parents. And that's a time where I can stand and talk and chit chat and see families. And then when the afternoon comes and I pick them up, I'm outside for like a good 10 or 15 minutes, just kind of casual conversation. I see them daily. And you get to meet a lot of the family members, and just the parents can tell me like, oh, they didn't sleep good, or I can, but that daily contact with the parents in my public school, none of the other teachers get that because the kids come on the bus and leave on the bus. But if another teacher has that opportunity, I found that is the most important and valuable time. Like, yes, all the other events are really great, but if a parent needs to talk to me, it's like I can have these little mini conferences almost daily or weekly. And I'm very fortunate for that. So, that might be something that other teachers also have.
That's a really, really important time of the day. I completely agree. I wanted to just, before we move on to the next slide, just looking at the time, I wanted to just read what Nicole had entered for the low impact around the end of the year strategies, which would be celebration strictly in the classroom with just peers and teachers. And then on the high end of that would be an end of the year celebration tour with families and a tour of which grade they're moving on to. So in this case, we're going to talk about moving on to kindergarten. But also if they're transitioning to first grade or second grade, meeting the teachers, seeing the classroom, that sort of thing, but also including other spaces in the school, including the cafeteria, the gym, the office, where they'll do art classes and that sort of thing. So parents and children get more familiar with
Thank you, Marcy. I'm just getting myself caught up in the chat box real quick.
Yeah, also. And I think, I'm not sure who, Katie's comment about having not a formal graduation, but 3 days of family days at the end of the year. I really like that you do it over the 3 days. I think that gives families who are not necessarily able to go on a Wednesday, but they can be there on a Friday. It gives families that time to really make sure it fits into their schedule also. So I think that's a really great idea.
So, like Marcy said in the beginning, this was an activity we did a few weeks ago with the family engagement strategy. So we just wanted to reiterate it as a way to consider your transition strategies and where they might fall and how they might be built upon incoming school years and incoming grades to improve transitions overall. Because even if a child is transitioning smoothly into your classroom or into the next grade, it doesn't mean they don't have internal anxieties or questions or that they wouldn't benefit from having these opportunities that we've discussed. So keep that in mind. Sometimes transition or struggling with transitions isn't always an outward behavior. Sometimes families and children can keep it very much internalized. So if it looks like it's going well, great. Doesn't mean it can't benefit from some added conversation and thought. Okay, so I'm just going to move us along. Oh, hold on. Okay, multitasking. Okay, so moving on, another piece of this sort of puzzle of transitioning is, of course, including all students and families, and especially those that are coming in with an IEP. So for students with current IEPs, you may be familiar with, CVS will schedule a transition meeting. So primarily this is because our services for students in pre-K are what we call Part B services, which means it serves students between the ages of 3 to 5 years old. And as students enter kindergarten and they enter the main public school at the age of 5, that means that they're now going to also transition out of CDS services and into school-based special education services. And that in and of itself for any child, family, educator, can be a huge move because it can look much different. We all know, that there's staffing shortages and concerns around timing of services with CDS and referrals, et cetera. And I'm not going to go down that road in this conversation here and now. But there's also struggles for public school staff and for public school services as well. So ultimately, we want the child and the family to know that if they qualify for an IEP, that is going to continue in the public school space, but that it might look a pinch different. You're going to have new faces, you're going to have new therapists, you're going to have new case managers. So the transition meeting at the end of the pre-K school year before kindergarten starts is a really important time for all of those folks to come to the table, hopefully is able to successfully do with and without assistance, and then make decisions for how that might look in the kindergarten space. So here, I'm going to turn my video off for just a moment. I'm getting a connection unstable message, so I'll keep talking now. So this transition meeting, it's effective for the child's current Part B services, like I said, moving into the public school setting. Getting ahead of myself on that. The child's team is invited, right, including the parents and the family. Really, we shouldn't be conducting any of these transition meetings or IEP meetings without input from the parents and the family. Preschool teachers are invited, current service providers, the IEP coordinator, the kindergarten teacher or a kindergarten teacher representative, as well as public school providers and the principals. So all those folks are coming together to have that conversation around, the child services, what they've been receiving and where they might be going. Teachers can also help parents and families be prepared for this and understand this process better. Again, it's just a matter of your communication with the families, right? What is it that they need to know about this process? How can you make the process more smooth? Giving them any information, any videos, any context will make the process better. So your educator's role during all of this would be, this isn't just around students with IEPs, it's sort of backing up and looking at the grand scheme of transitions again. So for my public pre-K teachers, you're getting students coming in who have not had a public school experience yet, right? Because pre-K is going to be the earliest, youngest grade for them. So are there ways that you could visit programs in your community that students might be attending before they come to you? So maybe there's childcare centers, maybe there's a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club, etc. Putting yourself out there, getting to know those teachers, getting to know those programs, and interacting to find out more about the student can help transition them into your space. So that's the second bullet as well, meeting with childcare, preschool, other partners, etc. Some other great opportunities for pre-K and K teachers to come together is around joint professional development opportunities. So more often than not, the professional learning opportunities that your school hosts are not always aimed at our youngest learners and our teachers of our youngest learners. So we need to make sure that there's applicable professional development opportunities where pre-K and K teachers can come together, hear the same information, hear the same terminology, hear the same vocabulary, and really have open conversation around how those PD topics benefit them in their classrooms and how they can come together as a team. Remember, kindergarten in Maine is universal. So it's very likely that your schools have multiple kindergarten classrooms because you're serving all age eligible 5-year-olds who are interested. Pre-K, however, is not universal everywhere yet. So you might have multiple kindergarten classrooms, but only one pre-K classroom, one pre-K teacher, right? So that can be a very lonely position for so many teachers because they don't have a team of like-minded folks behind them. So we've really got to sort of bridge that gap between pre-K and K. Collaboration around schedules, routines, languages. This is a really important transition strategy that can benefit pre-K into K. Kindergarten, if you have a half-day pre-K program and now students are going to be experiencing a full-day kindergarten program, that's a big step. So talking with kindergarten teachers around what routines and schedules and expectations you have in your classroom and how they might mirror some of that at the beginning of the school year so that there's less guesswork, like I was saying earlier, for the students. Of course, CDS IEP transition meetings will be happening, and then any opportunities to share that strength-based data, individual child information, child placement instruction, etc. So this really points back to our assessment strategies, what's been happening all year in the pre-K space to observe the child development and growth over time, and what information can be shared with the next teacher that he or she can build from. I'm going to pause there. I see some things in the chat. I talked fast to that, so sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to move us along to, I believe, our one of our final slides.
Okay, so because we feel like transitions are an incredibly important time, we talked about this earlier, they're very important, they're often overwhelming for families, for children, and sometimes for educators where you don't know who's coming into your classroom necessarily. And the transition into school can help set up our students and our parents for a successful year and beyond. So we at the Department of Education are working on a few projects right now to continue the conversation. We do have a website that is up and running at this point, and I'm going to throw that in the chat right now. So we have a website around transitions. There's a piece up for educators, and there's a parent piece also, two different pages with a bunch of resources, information, that sort of thing on there. We are going to be working in the next couple of months to kind of enhance that website. It has not happened yet, but we're working on that. We're also working with a technical assistance grant. And so we're working with a TA professional on guidance around building training modules for our educators in our state that will be free of charge, and they will be online this fall, hopefully. And so that's all about successful transition practices, including, working with parents, working with educators, working with different programs, also working to build transition plans, both district-wide, school-wide, and individually for each child, and how to do that throughout the course of the year, not just in the spring or in the summer or in the fall, but for year-round. I think that will be a 5-part series with a facilitation guide also. And so I think our next slide is all about questions. So feel free to pop any questions in the chat room or unmute yourself and speak, and then we'll do the certificate right after that.